Welcome back to Second Accent podcast. Today we speak with Metamyther, musician from USA with interesting cinematographic approach.
You can literally be like screwing around on the keyboard, and then if you're like come across something that's really good, you could just say, oh, capture what I just played.
He shares a lot about the way he do music, produces music.
I feel like a lot of people spend time on like production, right? Like understanding compressors and so on. But a lot of people maybe shy away from theory.
And about his views and philosophy that stays behind the process of creating music. So I hope you will enjoy this episode. If at some point you would like to check his music, I will leave links to his website and music on music platforms in the description. So feel free to jump to his music. Thank you for tuning in and let's go. First of all, thank you very much for recording this one with me because I'm really excited about this particular one. I've read your interview with Laura. My 100 questions turned into 200 questions actually after this one. And I would like to ask something else and same stuff that you were speaking in this interview because I'm very excited to create a piece of content where people can know more about you in audio version. You started with Nintendo? What was that?
Yeah, I mean, that was just kind of like, my first entrance point into electronic music was just playing on the 8-bit Nintendo system. Obviously, it had to be digital, right? It had to be kind of electronic. So, I was playing like games like Super Mario Brothers and stuff like that. So not really realizing that I was hearing electronic music just because it was part of the game. But yeah, I mean, probably at 3 or 4 or 5 years old, I was playing those games. So that was the first time I really heard electronic music.
Especially Mario, their team like very focused on sound design. This is interesting. I was wondering, is there some particular games that like related to creating music?
Well, we had this was much later, but we had this game called Mario Paint, where it had a kind of music making part in it. It was kind of a weird game, quote unquote, because it wasn't really like a game. It was more like just a place where you could like go and paint pictures and stuff like that. But it had like a music composition thing in it. But I think by this point I was probably already doing stuff in like a MIDI program. I think I had something called, it was like MIDI Composer or something like that, where I was just doing very basic arrangements, probably, by the time, my early teenage years or something like that.
Is that software for computers or what is that?
Yeah. I grew up playing piano, so it was easy for me to like understand theory and kind of the piano roll. So yeah, my parents got me this kind of very, very basic MIDI software, which is kind of where I started playing stuff. And then I moved on to this thing called a tracker. I was using ModPlug, which is like, if you were to look at pictures of it, it's like really, really daunting. It's like really crazy to look at and understand. Like it makes kind of no sense. Because the notes go up and down, they don't go left and right. You have to kind of like draw in the notes a completely different way. It's almost like mathematical values. It's really crazy.
Unusual interfaces of 18s, 19s and stuff like that, and I suspect this is something like that, right? This was your first instrument where you started to play piano from 5 years old?
Yeah. And so I've just basically always had a very important sense of theory, and as I hear a lot more electronic music, I feel like a lot of people spend time on like production, right? Like understanding compressors and so on, but a lot of people maybe shy away from theory, and I've never really understood that, because to me it's like, like I just feel like people hear compressors and saturation much less than they hear a melody, for example.
Makes sense. It's like sound design versus like sound itself. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm watching for like musicians from both sides, from classical music where they like play real time, and they're not really like Apple Music people or Spotify people. They are more like about real time playing, and concerts basically. Other side is sound designers who like do what you just said, like they do this stuff like sound design, compressing, like all these plugins. I have like questions to both of them, and I agree with both of them as well. I think the truth somewhere in the middle between these directions, because basically it's better for you to judge about it, because as I've read in this interview about you, your father introduced you into music world, right?
Yeah, I mean, he had literally, we called it the music room in my house. It was a room that was just dedicated. It had the piano in it, and then it had all these CDs. It was like a wall of CDs, and he would have his like stereo system there and a couch right in front of the stereo system. And so it was, it didn't have that room didn't have a TV in it. So it was literally like you would sit in the couch for the purpose of listening to music. It was like, in a way, a sacred space almost for listening, which, it just had a huge impact on me. I mean, most of the CDs that he had, like I would say 95% of it was classical music. So it wasn't like, it wasn't the library that I necessarily was drawn to, but, just the importance to music was impressed upon me from like a really early age. Like he would have CDs that would have, let's say the same Mozart composition, but it would just be different people playing it, right? So it would almost be like he was getting the same record, but different artists playing it.
What was your, maybe if you remember, like first impressions of this room?
Like my sister and I would not sort of play in that room. We wouldn't like run around in that room. Like, so we kind of saw that there was a bit of a devotion to music, which I really appreciated. There was also like a lot of equipment that I didn't necessarily understand with like the stereo system, right? But we understood that it was kind of kept like really pristine, so it wasn't really, it was kept like mint condition, right? So we thought, oh, okay, this must be probably pretty expensive. I don't know if it was. But, as a kid, you have no money, right? And you have no concept of how much something is worth. But we understood that this was kind of important.
Like as a kids, we don't understand like not only like financial value, but also like psychological value of stuff, And if I saw that such a room, I wouldn't think that something like big going on. Like if I saw it right now, yes, of course it's different impressions.
Today, yeah.
But back then, which is why it was interesting about your relationships with piano. How are they like back then and right now?
Honestly, like piano was something that my parents kind of pushed me into. They saw the value of it more than I did. So honestly, I came, as a teenager playing it probably for an hour a day. It became kind of like a chore, especially when I had a lot of schoolwork. It was difficult to, kind of make time for it, right? But as I went to college, there was a place where there was just a free piano there in one of the rooms that you could go and play, and I would go and play that a little bit, but I started to kind of lose my relationship with the piano, and that's something that I haven't really necessarily completely brought back even today. I do have a piano in my house. It's kind of an upright. It's obviously not a grand piano. I mean, I live in like New York City, right? That's just not going to fit. But I've recently discovered jazz, and I was hoping that, I played so much classical music back in the day, and I was hoping that, some jazz would kind of come in. I think that would have sparked a little bit more interest for me. I didn't really understand jazz back then, but just the way that the melodies and chords is completely unconventional as far as classical music. So I'm kind of trying to explore that now and trying to delve more into like jazz practices as I take that into my own composition.
And what's your like these days your main instruments that you most excited about?
Well, I actually just got a new synthesizer. It's a Moog Sub 37. I got that maybe a week or two ago, and I'm really psyched about that because that particular one, why I chose it, is it has a digital patch storage component to it, whereas the sound itself is completely analog. So this allows me to save presets, which you can't do with, I think, you can't do that with analog hardware, right? So, and they also have like an app that you can use in Ableton to control the synth. So to me, it kind of straddles the analog and digital world really well for me. I think I'm gonna get like an piece of completely analog gear in the future, but for now, this is kind of like a good middle ground. And then aside from that, I have a Nord Lead 2X, which I use pretty heavily, at least for a keyboard controller. I don't necessarily even all the time use the sounds from it, but it's always right by my side, and I reach for that whenever I'm trying to figure out, a melody. I don't really draw stuff in as much. I really just always play it
Basically
in.
in real time, like do, delete, do again, delete, do again.
Sometimes real time. Ableton now has this amazing feature called the capture, which it's like you can literally be like screwing around on the keyboard, and then if you're like come across something that's really good, you could just say, "Oh, capture what I just played." So it's good because I think when you hit the record button, there's this kind of there's this not pressure, but there's this kind of like sense that I have to be completely on, right? So I think if you're a little bit more free with it, like kind of just doodling around, and then if you like something, and then you can kind of go back and capture it instantly. I mean, to me, that's a total game changer.
Yes, this is exactly like you said, that's a game changer, because this record button, it like once you like push this button, since this moment you are not like something. It's my like experience, but since this button is pushed, you are not a creative like process anymore. You are much machine that need to like execute. Yeah, I think it would be cool for me to have something like that. You said it's in Ableton, right?
Yeah, and I think actually a couple of other DAWs have it. Like I think Logic has it. Yeah, I mean, like simply put, I think it changes your relationship to the composition, right? When you hit record, you're now in a performative mode, whereas before you're kind of just playing. You're just kind of discovering maybe a little bit, as opposed to you're committing something to the timeline when you hit record.
There is like several like types of relationships with soundtrack, I think, and in some soundtrack it's monologue. You just dictating what is going to be next. In other relationships, you have a basically conversation with your soundtrack, where like you trying to hear what your soundtrack wants from you, and then you edit. And I think in first case it's not a big deal, but in second case, like with this conversation between you and soundtrack, this recording feature is a really cool thing.
Yeah, it's huge. What you're using? You're using Logic, or what are you on?
I use basically GarageBand.
Okay.
I just play stuff, and it doesn't really matter. In most of cases, I don't even watch on the screen.
Apple is really smart in terms of the whole GarageBand thing, because it's kind of like, you can use that for free, and then when you're ready to kind of take it up to the next level, you can just open up those projects in Logic. I think Apple gets a lot of Logic people because they start in GarageBand.
I don't think I paid too much attention to what people use. I just know that like Ableton is pretty simple with that, less as to start with Ableton, because most of equipment like gives you Ableton, and when you go to like to purchase some synthesizer or stuff like that, you will hear like you will get Ableton for that. And we see a lot of Ableton users who prefer like live performance, like who, or more like meticulous approach, where you're not that much like playing stuff out, but more like arranging it, like in a time code or whatever. It's more like this FL people, like when like they bend sounds and stuff like that. So yeah, this is the main thing that I've noticed, but basically I don't really pay attention to what people use.
Yeah, I mean, you can get there with anything, I mean, I think Ableton is just kind of like, to me, it's the ultimate tool. I mean, there's so much stuff that you can do in there. Totally the live component, I love that. But just a lot of its arrangement tools as well. Even that they have like 5 or so like different like modes where you can like stretch sound, and they all sound totally different. So that's just a great creative tool right off the bat. Yeah, I mean, it's awesome. I mean, I don't see myself like switching anytime soon. I just really enjoy using it. I can get pretty fast in it too.
Yeah, I'm considering like using Ableton.
Oh yeah, you should give it a try.
I want to try that because yeah, there is some features with my gear that available with Ableton only, and I want these features. So yeah, but as I said, like in ideal world, I don't really care about digital workstation. In ideal world, I have several real classical instruments and good microphone, basically. I don't really into like that stuff. About classical instruments, as I see, you like use synthesized like sounds mostly, right? It's at least like 80% of your soundtrack. What's your like classical instruments, the favorite at this moment?
Well, I use the East-West Sounds packages a lot, and you have like a monthly subscription type thing, and then you could use a lot of their packs. I love their orchestral stuff. I've used that quite a bit. They have this thing called like Voices of Opera and Voices of the Empire, which I'm kind of playing around with right now. It's kind of these vocal segments. You can kind of like synthesize your own vocal melody, which is crazy with words and everything. It's pretty interesting.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's nuts. Like it sounds kind of okay, but yeah, I mean, I think, if you're really working intensely with vocals, you probably want to get a vocalist and stuff. But, just to scratch something in for the sort of the rough draft, I think it's a pretty interesting thing. I just got out a couple of output products. I got Thermal and Portal. Those are awesome plugins. Thermal is like this distortion plugin. It's crazy. And Portal, it sort of uses the same interface, but it's sort of this multi-effect plugin as well. That's awesome. Yeah, right now I'm just kind of exploring the new synthesizer, right? The Moog. So, yeah, I mean, I've kind of started to hone in on like a consistent palette. So you kind of know whenever you hear one of my songs, like, oh, that must be Metamyther. It has a sort of personality to it, a sonic timestamp in a way.
It definitely has, yes. It's pretty simple to understand when you play, like without picture, without anything. Like, I don't know, playlist on random and your soundtrack play, and I in different room. I know that's you. That is you. Even if it's new work that I haven't heard yet, I already know it's you because this is what I wanted to speak about on but I don't have like really a lot to say about it. I just want to say like it's quite rare to see someone able to have his own face and sound without singing.
Yeah, I think it's, in a way, I started this project only a couple of years ago, and, I'm in my, late 30s right now, basically. So I started in my mid 30s. And, at this point, I think it has something to do with just like, I sort of know who I am in the world. And so I knew how I kind of wanted to present the project and what I wanted to do with it. So everything from, the photo shoot that I did, I just love abandoned spaces. So I knew that I wanted to kind of situate myself in there. It has to do with, I kind of grew up in this, what we call like, a Rust Belt town where it had like an abandoned asbestos factory where it was kind of just like this thing in the town that my friends would sometimes go to and just like run around in. I actually ended up shooting like just a short film there. But, so this has kind of always been really interesting to me, this kind of urban or suburban decay, how nature kind of takes over the man-made structures after humanity is well gone. It also relates to sort of industrial music, this kind of industrial structures. So like it's kind of spinning all around with that kind of stuff, so I knew that I wanted to kind of situate myself there. And also the music can be kind of dark, right? So it kind of speaks to that. Like, as an artist, you have to kind of figure out like what is in the background, because that creates the context.
Darkness in music, it's a quite subjective thing to me. I think it's like for something that dark for you, not dark for another person, which is why I'm not trying to judge music from that perspective. Would I call your music dark? Yes, I think yes, but I like this darkness. I mean, we both like create dark music, pretty dark, but at least people call my music dark. But yeah, which is why it's pretty close to me. It feels deeper. I don't know. It makes you like think about what's going on in your life and stuff like that. I don't understand how to like think about such stuff with some bright melody of happy piano slash happy walking in a sunset or whatever, you know.
Yeah, and honestly, like a lot of the songs, I'm doing this kind of three act structure in all of my songs, and honestly, a lot of them they kind of go from a minor key and then they'll modulate to the relative major key, which uses the same key signature, the same sharps and flats, but now it has the kind of different context, right? So it's a really easy way to create this change in your song without necessarily swapping to a completely crazy key, which might not make sense. So a lot of the songs actually are they're dark in a way, but they kind of end on this hopeful tone. I don't know if you felt that, but like something like Down the Barrel of Eternity or Blast Radius, they all end on this kind of hopeful, empowering kind of note.
I have a question about your 15 years break. You are 30 years in music, right?
Yeah, I mean, music has always been a part of my life. I did take a break compositionally. Like, I didn't write any music for a really long time. But what I realized is that creative energy or flow just kind of presented itself in completely different ways. So basically after college, I wasn't really writing a lot of music, and I came to college wanting to get involved I came to New York City wanting to get involved in more video stuff. So I was writing a lot of feature-length screenplays, and I started shooting my own stuff. So that was kind of the first couple of years of living in New York City. And then I kind of got, much more into the writing aspect of it. I started, I became a bit of a music journalist. So I was working on that. And then I realized, I'm reviewing all these artists' albums, but really I felt like I was like sitting on the sidelines. And I was like, as I kind of started to hear the trends of electronic music and what was sort of being presented and what was not, I really thought, okay, I can create something new here. And, having that sort of journalistic perspective, I was like, okay, what can this project be? And how can I express who I am through that, right? So it goes back to the classical training, like I was playing all these sonatas that were 3 movements, right? And so I was like, oh, wouldn't it be interesting if there was electronic music that kind of took you on a journey, that kind of developed, I mean, I listen to so much electronic music that is just kind of like one idea for 8 minutes long, right? And it's kind of like, okay, that idea could maybe be 3 or 4 minutes long and we could kind of be done, right? Like, you're opening up the filter and closing the filter. You're taking away the kick drum and bringing in the kick drum. There's not really too much to it. And I kind of wanted to just create something a bit different that at no point could you say, I'm bored of this, right? Because it's constantly changing. It's constantly trying to move you to a different place. So that's kind of how the project came about, I guess. But yeah, through all that, I mean, I just realized that creative energy just presented itself in completely different ways.
I think it's misunderstood method. People use it like main thing of soundtrack, but people who know how to use it, I'm speaking about AES Dana from French, or carbon-based life forms, or let's say melons, or yeah, we can go on with that pretty long list, but they use this like root arrangement not as a main idea. They create this like fundamentals out of this thing, and then they just add details into that. And the soundtrack is not about this repetitive, like same sounding, like ideas that change each other, like with time, but with the ideas, and they like give you different interpretation.
Oh man, I mean, I'm listening to, I mean, every dub techno song is kind of like this to a certain degree, but it's one of my favorite genres of music, honestly. Likewise, with like a lot of ambient and drone stuff, it tends to be really minimal, right? And kind of changing only a little bit. I think it's almost like there's different functions to this music, right? Where it's, people, when they talk about streaming music, they talk about the lean back music, as opposed to the lean forward music, where it's kind of lean back is sort of more playlisty. You sort of don't know who the artists are at all, and you're just kind of playing, a synthwave or a dub techno playlist, right? But then there's kind of the lean forward stuff where you're typing in who you want to listen to, kind of thing, and you're deeply engaged and focusing on the music. So yeah, maybe it's a focus or context thing. Also, I mean, obviously a lot of music is made for the dance floor, right? As opposed to listening at home. So it's all just different functions, maybe.
This music much less like attractive to average listener, because I don't know, it requires for listener to have some backstory. It's like cultural thing.
Yeah, it's almost like, I would love to write like liner notes to this or something. I mean, it's on my website, like a kind of statement of each album and kind of what it means, but it's like how many people are going to the website, like everybody's just hearing the music. I wish like Spotify and all these services had a way to even list credits, right? Like I can't, mention who else helped out with the album, right? It's like there's no information available where you can just have that, yeah, I mean, I know what you mean with like I think you were kind of talking about like a slow burn, like tracks present themselves after 2 or 3 minutes. I've got a track coming out that you're going to be super into. It's like 11 minutes long, and it's like this kind of slow orchestral build. I think in particular you're going to like it because there's a lot of sort of organic elements, and then they kind of meld with the electronic stuff. Yeah, you're going to like it. It comes out in like 2 months.
Is that a part of album Tachogrammatus, or is that something new?
This is the new one. So the new album is Tachogrammatus. So I started thinking about, okay, what has sort of defined my sort of process in music for like the last year. And I've just been so obsessed with speed on many different levels. Like a lot of people who know me, I go really fast at like a lot of things. I'm very much like a person of action. So for me to kind of like really push forward and, on a lot of different fronts in terms of my life and my creative pursuits, like that was something that sort of defined me. So Tacho was the kind of speed element to this. Tachogrammatus is actually the name of this entity who you see on the front cover. He's sort of entering our world through this kind of triangular dimensional portal. So it's kind of like a sci-fi thing. But I was also really inspired by the Afrofuturism movement, which basically is a kind of science fiction movement which talks about, ways to sort of live in a better world, right? Obviously, African Americans have experienced so much trials and tribulations throughout the centuries. And this was their way of kind of cathartically kind of exploring a way that we could have a different, better world, right? So Tachogrammatus comes to Earth and delivers the 5 tracks that are on the album. And these 5 tracks are kind of, in a way, a sort of secular scripture for how we can live in a better world. And so the first one, which the first track is out now, is called New Canons. And this is all about, if we want art to be the sort of change that we want to see in the world, then we have to really think about and reconsider who are those artists that we sort of revere as the canon, right? And over the last couple of years, like this has just been something that a lot of people have been thinking about. And, if art is really going to bring about some really drastic changes in the world for the better, we have to kind of include a lot of different types of voices. So that's kind of where new canons comes in. And I'm not even necessarily talking about minority voices, although that is part of it. But it's also kind of, I'm not sure as a culture that we consider, how should I say this? I'm not sure we as a culture sort of revere the right types of musicians, right? Like the musicians that we currently think are the best are the ones that get the most streams on Spotify or, you know, are played on radio. But what I'm thinking is, you know, it's kind of like we're existing on a cultural diet of junk food a little bit, you know, and I think we need a little bit more substance in our diet, perhaps.
Yes, I agree, but at the same time, no one say us like love this artist or appreciate this artist. It's always up to us. Like, it's more like not social thing. I think it's more personal thing, individual thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like assuming that people will search out this music, right? I'm not totally sure that that's the case, right? I mean, everybody's kind of in playlist culture right now, and you know, I mean, I feel like a lot of people listen to the music that they're very comfortable with, right? Like the sort of musical explorer or adventurer. I mean, it probably describes you, but does it describe most people? I'm not totally sure, you know.
I don't think we should like think from this perspective about music, like, and about most. It's personal thing, and it's the best example is very good quality YouTubers. I mean, what they change in this world. Once someone who watched trash on YouTube, one video from this quality YouTuber will change whole perspective of this person on the whole content on YouTube. And the function of music artists is the same. It's like our music taste never was like perfect and not perfect or whatever. Perfect is not a thing in such subjective topic, but before AES Dana or carbon-based life forms, or I didn't know what is good music. I considered something else as a good music, you know. Then they appeared, then other people appeared, then you appeared, and this all like, I mean, what artist I think should go to is to be someone's before after.
Yeah, I mean, there's another aspect to this as well, where it's like, you know, let's use sounds that were never together and let's put them together, right? So it's sort of like it's kind of blending a bunch of genres, and in so doing, kind of creating something new. Like, you know, for example, I have the fourth song that's coming out on the album is called Psychoscopic Fields. And it's written in 7/4, so it's kind of a weird meter, and it uses these kinds of tribal drums, which, you know, I think in an electronic context is not used all that much. You know, just the palette, I guess, of sounds that are used is kind of different, right? Like, or a song that's already out right now is Collective Cartography, which, you know, is this kind of dubstep-y kind of song, but it has a harp in it. And then the harp is kind of subjected to all these kind of weird reversing and kind of reverb effects. So it's kind of like, you know, I've never heard that before. And when I came across the harp, I was like, oh, actually, this could be really interesting to kind of mix a harp with this kind of gritty, kind of darker dubstep-y sound, you know. So, I mean, it's just, you know, I think it's all about that. It's like taking opportunities from that, right? Like blending two genres together and seeing what kind of comes out of it. So that's another sort of strategy that I use.
Yeah, that's a good sign when you're trying to ask artist what genre he creates in, and the artist struggles to answer.
Flip side of this is that, oh, well, the music is not like marketable, right? Like if you have a tech house track, that is a tech house track, and you can market to tech house people, right? So it's kind of like, you know, a dubstep song with harp is that, will dubstep people like it, you know? So it's tough. Like, and as I've kind of started kind of thinking about marketing, it becomes a little bit difficult. But on the flip side of that, it's kind of like, well, maybe a lot of different people will intersect with this, and maybe it can work on some level.
Yeah, this is like question of priorities, like recognition or originality. I don't know.
Yeah, and it's probably a mix of both, right? So, you know, you have to sort of exist in the world and kind of push it forward. So yeah. Well, I was so interested when you were talking with Tobias about this whole SoundCloud thing, because that seems to be a completely different planet than what I think he and I are kind of on a closer page, in terms of, like, just trying to get everything on Spotify and promoting it there, and so on. But yeah, it seems like SoundCloud is kind of this amazing musical underbelly that, where there's so many great artists like lurking there. Like, honestly, I haven't explored too much of it, but you seem to be really deep in it.
Not like really deep, but yeah, on daily basis, and I really have like huge amount of respect to SoundCloud, and I have like huge amount of respect to SoundCloud musicians because they are very humble and they are very focused on what they trying to bring, and they are allow their selves to act differently because SoundCloud is not a place where you can get a lot of money. Usually, these artists don't do anything at all to get the money. They just don't care about like money part of this process. They completely in art. I know people who do stuff I never will be able, I guess, to do in terms of discipline while creating soundtrack, and all this people, this music platform, all this stuff changed a lot my life. I think if there wasn't SoundCloud, my life wouldn't be. I think I met you on SoundCloud, by the way.
Oh, nice. I mean, it seems like you're pretty deep into it. I mean, if you're on it every day, like, it's what's interesting about SoundCloud too is I see a lot more kind of demo stuff on there. And you were talking about this with Tobias, where, artists will sort of solicit feedback. It's much more of a space for that. I mean, you can comment on tracks. I mean, that's something that you can't do on Spotify, right? So
on each second of soundtrack, which is quite
yeah,
important.
exactly.
Yeah, SoundCloud
Yeah.
has a lot. I
Yeah.
mean, if we will continue with SoundCloud, it will be 10 hours episode or 24 hours
Yeah, yeah,
episode. It's like, yeah, I just like have huge deep respect to this platform. I'm very grateful to them for everything they did for me. I don't earn like a lot money of SoundCloud, but I still like promote it because not everything about money. I just want people to feel this atmosphere of SoundCloud. I don't care if they go there actually, but I just think that yeah, everybody should experience SoundCloud to understand what is that, because this is just, I don't have words for this. Like, I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
basically again, I meet a lot of 19 persons of 19 like 5 persons of music on Second Accent Radio were found on SoundCloud, and this is
Mhm.
very respectful people. This is I never met anywhere like people like I meet on SoundCloud.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you even found me on SoundCloud, because, it's not some place where I mean, I put the tracks up, but it's not some place where I spend a lot of like my energy in terms of like, trying to promote it or, making friends there. So, I mean, sounds like I should spend more time there.
Metamyther, what is this?
I knew that I wanted it to be a kind of created word, because it's just really difficult to get artistname.com, right? Or just, get artist name on Spotify, right? And you have to kind of create something that's you're able to Google. I mean, this is being a musician in 2020 or whatever, right? At the time I was really looking at a lot of stuff by Joseph Campbell, and he has this book called Hero with a Thousand Faces, and he's really done a lot of work in terms of like narrative theory. So he outlines sort of the hero's journey, right? And another thing that he talks about is mythologies, right? And I thought that this was really, really interesting, and it connects. The word myth connects to like both positive and negative things, right? We have different connotations to it. Like something can be a myth, and it's like, oh, well, that's just a myth. That's like a negative thing. But myths are actually really important stories that we sort of tell ourselves, right? And so I started thinking about what kind of myths persist today, right? And so we see like stuff like fake news, right? That those are myths that persist today, but that's all obviously a negative thing. But then there's also kind of positive myths, right? That we kind of take into being and kind of like move forward with society with these myths, right? And technology reconfigures myths, right, as well. So, and now we're experiencing culture through this kind of metafictional lens, right, where everything is aware of itself and it's being commented upon. We have sort of like metafictional works. We have metafictional films, literature, so to me, Metamyther it's a cultural force that is sort of working underneath reality to affect it, right? And the fact that it has, the ER at the end, it's kind of like a verb, so it's an action word, right? So it's this entity that pushes against maybe perceived ways of doing things. And so this speaks to the kind of three act structure that I have in my songs, right? Obviously that's a call out again to Joseph Campbell, but I'm trying to create like a kind of new structure for music, right? Like we're very used to the sort of pop structure, A, B, right? Verse, chorus, and I kind of wanted to do something totally different from that. So in a nutshell, that's kind of what the project name means.
Myth is a tool to represent some concept or idea, right?
One myth that we have today is that science is, the cure-all for everything, right? I mean, I think it's noble to believe in that, but do we believe it maybe at our peril? Sometimes, I think obviously science is an incredible way of understanding the world, but do I think it's potentially the thing that's going to save us? No, like we have to save us, right? So we have to enact kind of change ourselves. So, it's just kind of like one myth, right? Like another myth might be good always wins over evil, right? I mean, in stories, that's great to believe, but it is a myth, and it doesn't mean that it doesn't have to come true, but it's kind of something that helps orient ourselves, and we can want to believe that it's true, but it is a myth that functions to sort of help us through the world because we want to act as moral beings, right? So we want to believe that good triumphs over evil, and it's sort of, it would, at the end of a story, it's kind of not the best when evil triumphs, but this is kind of a myth that we use to sort of organize our world.
Everything under control, like good guys always win and stuff like that. Yeah, I get that. I'm not buying it, but yeah, I get that.
It's kind of like, okay, is there a system or an entity or a being that is acting on these myths, right, on a meta level, and that's what the project really is about.
How do you design the experience for people?
Honestly, I feel like with this album that I'm putting out now, I've probably hit the limits of that. Like with the next album that I'm going to be doing, I am actually going to have vocals on it, I think, because it's, again, another conceptual album. It will be. So I think it makes sense to actually have lyrics in it. Like, I'm not going to be singing those lyrics. I might do some spoken word stuff, but I'm probably going to hire vocalists and work with them to realize that. But yeah, I mean, it's tough. I mean, each of the songs, obviously, the best way that it can be conveyed is through the title, but it's just a couple of words. So each of the movements in the compositions also have sort of titles, which kind of title each movement as they go on. But yeah, it's tough. I mean, again, like I was saying, there's so many different levels to it where, you can just connect with it through this kind of sonic level, so that it is about the juxtaposition of different sounds in place together. I think it can be looked at from a purely melodic and harmonic standpoint. the fact that the song takes you on a journey, that it sort of doesn't return to, its sort of starting point. It kind of starts in one place and then takes you to a completely different place and then takes you to another place, A to the B to the C. So then it's kind of like, what I find really interesting about it is like we could start in this planet and then end up on another completely different planet. And, 5 minutes later, you're like, how did we get here? But it kind of internally, it all makes sense. So, yeah, I mean, it's why do people like my music? I mean, I don't know. It's kind of like, all the things that I just listed is kind of like potential for that. Instrumental music, it definitely like functions completely differently than vocal music, right? Where you have an opportunity to connect with the lyrics on a much closer level. I will say like most of the music that I listen to is instrumental, right? Because actually I find when I'm working, lyrics kind of distract me. It's something about the human voice where it's like I am sort of drawn to it, and I can't like focus on if I'm writing something or if I'm doing something which requires my focus. I like to have instrumental music, like soundtracks and stuff like that to films, to listen to, because it's sort of less distracting. So yeah, I don't know if that's the case with everybody, but I expect that it probably would be a little bit. Yeah, and it's interesting, like, as, the last couple of months, there's a statistic in Spotify where you can see, what amount of people are just coming to you by searching for you and what amount of people have your stuff in their personal playlists. And the personal playlist has, like, grown over the past couple of months. So, yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. Like, something about it is, like, people come and listen to it and they want to save it a little bit more, as opposed to just kind of listening to it and then, thinking that they're going to come back to it. So I think like the playlisting, having their own personal playlist is kind of a factor to this as well. You just got to put the stuff out there that makes sense to you and is true to you. And, at that point, like, you just have to believe that people will attach to that authenticity and kind of hear that authenticity, right? Because it's going to be impossible to sort of chase trends, musical trends. And, I think people can hear when people are jumping on the bandwagon,
You can have 100 listeners who are like your beat, let's put it that way. Or you can create more experimental, You will have not 100, but I don't know, like one listener, but this listener will listen you like for next 10 years or 20 years until the end of his life, for example, as well. Pretty possible,
Yeah, it's like you're almost like talking about what does success mean, right? Where it's like, do you want a lot of listeners, or do you kind of want that hardcore contingent, or is listeners not even important to you, and do you just want to like focus on the music? Which it sounds like what the SoundCloud crowd again seems to be more interested in. I think it's like, in reality, it's probably just a mix of all that, where it's like, yeah, I mean, do you financial stability, doing music, that's something that could be important for people, so it's all kind of like different considerations. I would much rather people create the music that sounds like them, and then it could be categorized as, deep techno or deep house or something like that, right? Rather than just being like, I want to make deep techno and going towards that, if that makes sense, right? Or like, I'm trying to create, Skrillex type dubstep, right? Where it's like, well, Skrillex already is doing that, so you don't need to do that. Like, you need to like, look, it's not an easy thing, right? For an artist to find their own sound, it's probably very difficult for, most artists, because they end up making music that sounds like the artist that they really like, right? So it's a tough thing.
Oakfeller, I think he said, like, music is like experiences, sounds like experiences, and you go through these experiences, put them in the sounds, and then you put these sounds into soundtracks, and people feel your experience, and you basically communicate on a level of sense without words with people by experiences. So it's not as hard, I think, to find your sound. It just requires a lot of time to find it, because experience can go like 10 years, 20 years.
Yeah, for sure.
30 years.
I think it's also like the horizon line. Like you keep walking towards it, but you're never going to get there, kind of thing. And so I think it's just kind of honing that sound and that aesthetic and that sensibility.
What is your perfect way of communicating with music world?
Ideally, I see myself as, somebody that can release music without sort of creative constraints other than the ones that I impose on myself. I'm definitely down to collaborate with people. I think it's could be super fun to do that. I've kind of chosen to just kind of be a solo project just because I know that I work really well just kind of exploring sounds on my own, and I have a lot of discipline, and I work at this every single day. So yeah, I'm not opposed to collaborations. As far as the people who enjoy my music, yeah, I hope that they pull something from it. That's what you hope for. That's what any artist hopes for, really.
Do you have some plans on live performances?
Yeah, I actually just did a friend's rooftop for here 420, which is actually they just legalized recreational weed in New York City. So it was within the last few weeks or something like that. So that's actually a huge thing, because it means that a lot of people who are put in jail for possessing weed will now be out, So I played a friend's rooftop show on 420, and that was a bit more of a different thing. It was a more improvised song that I just kind of came up with a couple of days ago. In terms of live, it's just going to really have to depend on how well the COVID regulations and all that is lifting. I definitely want to play live for sure. I had so much fun every time I played live. But for now, I'm kind of focusing on just kind of putting tracks out every month. So like I said, the first one is already out. The next one comes out probably middle of May, and it's going to be 5 tracks, each one coming out every month. So yeah, you could just check out that. Definitely follow me on Spotify or wherever you listen to music, because then you'll get your track right in your release radar or whatever it is. Yeah,
links in the description. For example, someone listened this episode and he would like to, or she, to speak with you about something or where is it perfect to reach out to you?
Yeah, so if you go to www.metamyther.com, all the links are there. Every Instagram.com/Metamyther, that's fine too. You can also email metamyther@gmail.com. But the main site, metamyther.com, has pretty much, that's the portal from where you can read about me or, access, places where I am and stuff like that. And then I'm on every music site as well, Spotify, Apple, Tidal. Just type in Metamyther and you'll find me.
Thank you very much for recording this episode with me. Honored very much.
Yeah, the pleasure was all mine. I had a blast. We should do this again sometime.
Yeah, I think we have a lot of things we opened but didn't close this time.
There's always more to talk about, right? We could talk about music for forever.
Thank you guys for listening, and see you in the next one.
See ya.